Ever have one of those moments where a brilliant idea just gets lost in translation? You start a project, everyone seems on board, but then it somehow just spirals into confusion and rework. Well, today we're going to talk about a super simple tool that turns all that chaos into crystal clarity. Okay, let's kick things off with a scene that's probably a little too real for a lot of us. You're in that kickoff meeting, right? Everyone's nodding, the requirements seem totally clear, and then a couple weeks later, you see what's being built and it's not at all what you pictured. It's that classic case of hidden misalignment. And that kind of confusion isn't just frustrating. It costs real time and money. It leads to scope creep, busted budgets, you name it. But what if there was a way to make sure that everyone, from the big stakeholders to the developers writing the code, is picturing the exact same thing? Well, that's where a use case comes in to save the day. So let's properly introduce the hero of this explainer, the use case. And here's the secret to getting it right away. Stop thinking of it as some boring technical document, because really, it's just a story. At its core, that's literally all it is. It's a short, focused story. We're not talking about the entire system here. We're talking about one single, important thing a user wants to get done, and we're telling that story from their point of view. I love this analogy. Think of yourself as the director of a short film. You're not just listing a bunch of features. You're actually scripting out the entire experience, scene by scene. You're showing what happens from that very first click all the way to the final successful outcome. And just like any good story, every good use case needs three basic things. You've got your main character, we call that the actor. You have the setting where the story takes place, that's the system. And you have the character's motivation, that's the goal. Get those three things, and you've got the foundation of your story. All right, so we've got our character and our setting. Now let's dig into the story's anatomy. Because a good use case, just like any interesting movie, needs a main plot. And, a few potential plot twists. So beyond our actor's system and goal, we start mapping out the plot. First, you have the main flow. That's the happy path. It's the ideal story where everything just works perfectly. But, and this is so important, a really good use case also describes the alternate flows. These are your plot twists. What if the password's wrong? What if the thing they want is out of stock? Planning for those is where you get true clarity. And we usually write this plot out in a really simple step-by-step table like this one. It's basically a conversation, a clear back and forth. The user does something, the system responds. This simple structure makes it so easy for anybody on the team to follow along. Okay, theory is one thing, but let's make this really concrete. We're going to use a real-world example that I think we've all been through, buying something online. So, let's set the stage for our little story. Our actor, a customer who's ready to do some shopping, the system, the e-commerce website they're on, and their goal, it's simple, to buy a product and have it be successful. And this right here is the happy path in all its glory. It's that smooth, seamless journey we all want. The customer finds their stuff, adds it to the cart, pays for it, and boom, gets that satisfying confirmation number. When everything goes right, this is exactly what happens. But here comes our plot twist. We've also planned for an alternate flow. What happens if their credit card gets declined? The system doesn't just, freeze up. No, it shows a helpful error message and lets the customer try again. By defining this part of the story, we make sure the experience is solid, not just wishful thinking. So you might be wondering, why go through all this trouble of writing a little story? What's the big deal? Well, the payoff is huge, and it all comes down to one simple, powerful word: clarity. So many projects start with a requirement like this. It's high level, it's super vague. Helps customers order. What does that actually mean? I guarantee everyone in the room has a totally different movie playing in their head for how that works. And that ambiguity, that's where things go wrong. Sound familiar? But then, a use case comes along and just flips that completely on its head. It takes that vague idea and turns it into a precise, actionable plan. There's no more guesswork. Everyone, the project manager, the designer, the tester, is literally working from the same script. So what does that clarity actually get you in the real world? Well, for one, you spot problems way earlier, before anyone's written a single line of code. Your developers know exactly what to build for both the happy path and the plot twists. And when you show it to stakeholders, they can finally see what you mean,
which means their feedback is 1,000 times better.
Now, you might be thinking, hang on, isn't this just a user story? And that's a great question because they're related, but they are very, very different. A user story is all about the high-level need. It tells you the what and the why. A use case is what dives deep into the how, the nitty-gritty, step-by-step interaction.
This is absolutely the best way to remember the difference. The user story is that catchy headline. As a customer, I want to buy a product. But the use case? That's the full article, with all the details, all the dialogue, and the complete sequence of events that make the whole story make sense. So I'll leave you with this question to think about for your next project. When you say a user needs to do this, have you actually mapped out the story of how they're going to do it? Because taking that little bit of extra time to write that story, that might just be the thing that makes your project a huge success.